Welcome to Creepy Corner, where the shadows whisper secrets and the truth is scarier than fiction. This year, 2024, has been one for the books. Terrifying encounters, unexplainable events, and true stories that will send chills down your spine. From haunted road trips to eerie late-night visitors, these accounts come straight from the brave souls who lived to tell their tale, but not without scars. Are you ready to step into the darkness? Let's dive straight into the stories. When Sarah received the letter informing her of her inheritance, it felt surreal. Her uncle, a man she hadn't spoken to in over a decade, had passed away, leaving her his secluded cabin deep in the heart of Ravenwood Forest. Despite their estrangement, the idea of escaping her monotonous life in the city was enticing. She packed a bag and drove for hours, leaving behind the hum of urban chaos for the quiet of towering trees. The cabin was smaller than she expected, weathered by years of neglect. The wooden panels groaned under her footsteps, and dust hung thick in the air. Despite the disrepair, Sarah felt a strange pull to the place, as though the forest itself were welcoming her. It was only after she found her uncle's journals that her unease began to creep in. The first few entries were mundane, notes on repairs, wildlife sightings, and musings on solitude. But as the pages turned, the tone shifted. His writing grew frantic, his words scattered. "They're watching," one entry read. "Always watching. The whispers never stop." Another page bore only a single line, scrawled in a shaking hand. "Never stay outside after midnight." Sarah laughed nervously, dismissing it as the ramblings of an old man. The forest was vast and wild, but surely it wasn't alive. Yet as night fell, a deep unease settled over her. The first whispers came just as she drifted to sleep. Soft and indistinct, they seemed to emanate from the woods outside. She sat up, heart pounding, straining to listen. The sound faded, leaving only the rustle of leaves in the wind. "Just my imagination," she muttered, turning over. But sleep eluded her. The whispers returned each night, growing clearer with every passing hour. By the third night, she could make out words. Her name, her thoughts, her fears. They spoke of memories she had buried, regrets she had locked away. It was as if the forest knew her. On the fourth night, curiosity overtook her fear. Armed with a flashlight, she stepped outside. The air was still, the forest unnaturally quiet. She walked a few paces from the cabin, scanning the shadows. Then she heard it. Her name, called softly but unmistakably from deeper within the woods. Against every instinct, she followed. The trees seemed to close in around her, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, filling her mind until it felt like her skull would split. The flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. That's when she saw them. Shadows moved between the trees, not cast by light, but formed of darkness itself. They had no faces, only hollow, glowing eyes that burned into her soul. They whispered as one, their voices a chorus of despair. "Let us in," they pleaded. "We'll take it all away." Paralyzed, Sarah remembered the warning in her uncle's journal. Never stay outside after midnight, but it was too late. The cabin was a distant memory now, swallowed by the forest. She turned to run, but the shadows surrounded her, their whispers filling every corner of her mind. "They'll leave if you let them in," her uncle had written. Desperate, Sarah screamed, "Take it! Take it all!" The forest fell silent, the shadows stilled. One by one, they dissolved into the darkness, leaving Sarah alone. But something had changed. The whispers were gone, but so was a part of her. The forest had taken her pain, her regrets, and with them, pieces of her soul. When Sarah finally stumbled back to the cabin, dawn was breaking. She looked into the cracked mirror above the sink and barely recognized the hollow eyes staring back. The forest was silent now, but it had left its mark. Sarah was free of her burdens, but at a cost she could never reclaim. And in the distance, the trees whispered again, waiting for their next visitor. In the 1960s, the Pritchard family moved into an unassuming house at 30 East Drive in Pontefract, West Yorkshire, England. It seemed like an ordinary suburban home, but it would soon become the site of one of the most terrifying and infamous hauntings in British history. The events that unfolded over the next few years were attributed to a malevolent entity known as the Black Monk of Pontefract, a poltergeist said to be tied to a grim legend from the area's past. The first signs of trouble. The haunting began in August 1966 when the Pritchards' teenage son, Philip, stayed home with his grandmother, Sarah. While the rest of the family was on vacation, strange occurrences disrupted the household. A fine white powder began falling from midair, settling onto the floors and furniture. Thinking it was some sort of prank or natural phenomenon, Sarah attempted to clean it up, only for it to reappear moments later. The disturbances escalated. Lights flickered erratically, and sudden pools of water appeared on the floor despite no leaks in the plumbing. Objects began moving on their own. A tea dispenser would eject its contents without anyone touching it, and furniture would shift or overturn entirely. Philip and his grandmother reported chilling drafts and strange noises that seemed to emanate from the walls. When the rest of the family returned, the activity continued unabated. Curtains swayed without wind, heavy furniture moved across the room, and loud banging sounds echoed through the house. Yet, there was no sign of intruders or logical explanation for the phenomena. Initially, the family dismissed the events as pranks or overactive imaginations, but it soon became impossible to deny something unexplainable was happening. Over time, the entity's presence became increasingly malevolent. It targeted Diane, the teenage daughter, with particular ferocity. Diane often felt icy hands grab her, pulling her hair and clothes. On one horrifying occasion, the entity dragged her up the stairs by her neck, leaving visible finger marks on her skin. The family's terror grew as the poltergeist began to manifest itself more physically, throwing objects across rooms and even slapping family members. Visitors to the house were not spared. Friends and neighbors who came to offer support witnessed objects levitating, heard disembodied voices, and felt sudden chills. On one occasion, a priest was called to perform a blessing, but his presence only seemed to enrage the entity further. Crosses were torn from walls, and the disturbances grew more violent. Local historians began to link the haunting to a grim tale from Pontefract's past. The house was built near the site of a former gallows where a 16th-century monk was executed for the murder of a young girl. The monk was rumored to have committed other heinous crimes and was said to haunt the area as an act of revenge or penance. Descriptions of the entity, including shadowy forms and the scent of musty robes, seemed to align with the legend. The poltergeist earned the nickname Fred among the family and investigators, though its actions were anything but friendly. Witnesses reported seeing a dark, hooded figure lurking in the shadows or appearing briefly before vanishing. These sightings only added to the growing fear and hysteria surrounding the case. Desperate to rid themselves of the haunting, the Pritchards sought help from paranormal investigators, priests, and psychics. Exorcisms were performed, but none succeeded in banishing the entity. In fact, many reported that the poltergeist seemed to grow stronger and more emboldened after these attempts. Objects flew through the air with greater force, doors slammed shut with deafening cracks, and the house's atmosphere became oppressively heavy. Diane, in particular, bore the brunt of the entity's wrath. She refused to be left alone in the house, her once cheerful demeanor replaced by constant fear. The family was at their wits' end, but felt trapped, as they could not afford to move elsewhere. After years of torment, the activity eventually subsided, though it never entirely stopped. The Pritchards remained in the house for some time before finally moving away. Today, 30 East Drive remains a notorious site for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers. Reports of shadowy figures, sudden cold spots, and eerie whispers persist, with many claiming that the Black Monk still resides there. The haunting of 30 East Drive has been the subject of books, documentaries, and films, cementing its place in paranormal lore. Skeptics have attempted to debunk the events, attributing them to hoaxes or overactive imaginations. However, the sheer number of witnesses and the intensity of the experiences leave many convinced that the Black Monk of Pontefract is one of the most terrifying poltergeist cases in history. In the summer of 2024, Matt Connolly, a rising star in the urban exploration community, decided to live-stream his journey into one of the most infamous locations in Virginia, Crestfall Asylum. Abandoned since the 1950s, the asylum was notorious for its history of patient mistreatment, experimental procedures, and a dark rumor that many deaths within its walls had been quietly covered up. Crestfall was a perfect storm of horror for Matt's growing online audience. His followers eagerly awaited the live broadcast, unaware that this would be Matt's final exploration. Crestfall Asylum opened in 1908, initially heralded as a sanctuary for those with mental illnesses. However, as time passed, the facility became overcrowded and resources dwindled. Reports of inhumane treatment began to emerge. Patients were subjected to barbaric experiments under the guise of research, and some were never seen again after being admitted. Local legends whispered that the basement was used as an unmarked morgue for those who disappeared. By 1952, the asylum was shut down after a state investigation uncovered horrific conditions, but many locals believed something darker lingered in its walls. Sightings of shadowy figures and unexplained sounds turned the abandoned asylum into a hotbed for ghost stories and thrill seekers. On the evening of August 12, 2024, Matt stood outside the asylum, a flashlight in one hand and his camera in the other. The weather was ominous, with clouds hanging low, threatening rain. "All right, folks," he said, addressing his livestream audience, "we're going in." Comments flooded the screen, some warning him to turn back, others cheering him on. From the moment Matt crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. His voice echoed unnaturally through the empty halls. The floorboards creaked beneath his steps, and a faint smell of mildew and something metallic hung in the air. As Matt explored, viewers began to notice anomalies. "Is that a shadow behind him?" one comment read. "Did anyone else hear that whisper?" another asked. Matt shrugged off these remarks, attributing them to the overactive imaginations of his audience. Things took a turn as Matt ventured into the asylum's administrative wing. His flashlight began to flicker. "Great," he muttered, tapping it. The light stabilized, but the air grew colder. He shivered and pulled his jacket tighter. That's when the first whisper reached him. Soft and faint, it was indistinguishable from the wind. Matt stopped in his tracks. "Did you hear that?" he asked the camera, panning around the empty corridor. No one replied, but his audience was now frantically commenting about faint voices. In the distance, a door slammed shut. Matt jumped, his breath quickening. "Okay, probably just the wind," he said, trying to convince himself. He pressed on, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Matt eventually found a staircase leading to the basement, a place he had read about in local legends. As he descended, the air grew heavier, and his footsteps echoed unnaturally. The walls were lined with old medical equipment, rusted wheelchairs, gurneys, and shattered glass jars. Scribbled on the walls in faded red paint were cryptic messages. "They watch in the dark, and leave while you can." Matt's audience exploded with comments. Some viewers claimed to see figures darting behind him, others insisted they heard voices calling his name. Matt, unaware of these warnings, approached a large metal door partially ajar. Pushing it open, he stepped into a room that seemed untouched by time. The air here was freezing, his breath visible in the beam of his flashlight. Inside, medical instruments lay scattered across the floor. A single operating table stood in the center, its leather straps frayed and stained. On the far wall, words were scrawled in what appeared to be blood. "We never left." Matt laughed nervously. "Well, this is creepy as hell," he said, his voice shaking. Then the flashlight died. In the pitch-black room, Matt fumbled with his camera light. Suddenly, a low, guttural moan filled the air. His livestream captured the sound, and viewers began to panic in the chat. "Get out now!" one comment screamed. A loud crash echoed behind him, followed by heavy, deliberate footsteps. Matt spun around, his camera capturing only darkness. "Hello," he called, his voice trembling. The footsteps grew closer. A faint red glow appeared in the corner of the room, illuminating the shadow of a tall, gaunt figure. Matt's screams pierced the silence as the camera fell to the ground. The live stream cut to static moments later. Rescue teams found Matt's car parked outside the asylum 2 days later, but he was never seen again. Inside the asylum, his camera and flashlight were discovered near the operating room. Investigators reported hearing whispers and seeing shadows moving in their peripheral vision, but no evidence of foul play was found. Paranormal investigators who visited Crestfall after Matt's disappearance claimed the asylum's energy was more malevolent than ever. Footage from Matt's live stream, which had been saved by his viewers, showed fleeting images of shadowy figures and glowing red eyes. One particularly chilling moment revealed a voice whispering, "We've been waiting for you." Crestfall Asylum remains abandoned, its dark legend growing with each passing year. Few dare to enter now, but those who do report the same oppressive darkness, the same whispers, and the feeling that something or someone is always watching.
In early 2024, a series of bizarre disappearances around Ravenwood Lake in Montana captured national attention. What began as a local mystery soon turned into a tale of terror that baffled investigators and enthralled the public. The eerie events surrounding the lake remain unexplained, leaving behind chilling accounts of those who encountered something they could not comprehend. Ravenwood Lake, nestled deep in the Montana wilderness, was once a quiet retreat for campers and hikers. In January 2024, a group of college students embarked on a weekend trip to the lake. They were avid adventurers, experienced in the outdoors, and eager to document their excursion on social media. Their last known footage showed them laughing around a campfire, the serene lake shimmering in the background. By Monday, none of them had returned. Search and rescue teams scoured the area for weeks. The campsite was found intact, their tents undisturbed, and their belongings untouched. A single set of footprints led into the woods, stopping abruptly near the shoreline. No further trace of the group was ever found. This was only the beginning. Over the following months, 2 more groups of visitors disappeared under similar circumstances. Each time, their campsites were discovered perfectly intact, with no signs of struggle. Locals began to avoid the lake, calling it cursed. In April 2024, a breakthrough came when 34-year-old hiker Emily Warren emerged from the forest near Ravenwood Lake, barefoot, disoriented, and covered in scratches. She had been missing for 5 days. Her account of what happened sent chills down the spines of investigators. Emily claimed that while hiking near the lake, she heard strange melodic humming that seemed to emanate from the water. Drawn by the sound, she ventured closer to the shore. As night fell, a dense fog rolled in, and she saw faint, glowing orbs hovering above the lake's surface. She described an overwhelming sensation of being watched, followed by a compulsion to enter the water. It wasn't just fear, she told investigators. It was like something was calling me, pulling me toward the lake. Emily resisted the urge and fled into the woods, but she claimed the orbs followed her, weaving between the trees. She heard whispers in an unfamiliar language and felt icy hands brush against her skin. Terrified, she hid in a hollowed-out tree trunk until sunrise when the phenomena ceased. Emily's story was met with skepticism, but her injuries and obvious trauma lent credence to her account. Paranormal enthusiasts flocked to the area, eager to document the strange occurrences. In May 2024, a team of investigators from a popular paranormal YouTube channel set up camp at Ravenwood Lake. Equipped with thermal cameras, audio recorders, and drones, they planned to spend the night documenting any anomalies. Their footage, later uploaded online, became a viral sensation. The video showed their equipment malfunctioning as soon as they neared the lake. Batteries drained rapidly, and their GPS devices displayed erratic readings. Around midnight, they captured eerie sounds, faint humming, whispers, and splashing in the water, though no wildlife was visible. The most chilling moment occurred when their drone captured footage of glowing orbs hovering above the lake. As the orbs drew closer to the shore, the investigators heard a deafening roar, and their cameras cut out. The team fled, abandoning most of their gear. Speculation about Ravenwood Lake's phenomena ran rampant. Local folklore spoke of a Native American legend about the Watchers, spirits who protected the lake from outsiders. It was said that those who disturbed the land would be lured into the water, never to return. Some attributed the events to environmental factors, such as toxic gas emissions or magnetic anomalies. Others believed the disappearances were the work of a cryptid or even extraterrestrial beings. Skeptics dismissed the stories as hoaxes or psychological delusions brought on by isolation. However, the sheer number of accounts and the consistency of the details made it difficult to ignore. In June 2024, the federal government cordoned off the area, citing public safety concerns. Official statements claimed the disappearances were due to natural hazards, but many suspected a cover-up. Conspiracy theories emerged, suggesting that the government was aware of the lake's supernatural nature and was studying it in secret. To this day, Ravenwood Lake remains off-limits, surrounded by rumors and unanswered questions. Those who ventured too close and returned spoke of inexplicable phenomena: the glowing orbs, the haunting whispers, and the sense of being watched. Despite the danger, the lake's legend continues to draw thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts, many of whom never return. Blackstone Inn, a quaint bed and breakfast nestled in the remote countryside of Vermont, was known for its rustic charm and history dating back to the 1800s. In early 2024, however, the inn became the center of a chilling tale that would leave guests and investigators alike questioning the line between the living and the dead. In February 2024, newlyweds Sarah and Mark Landon checked into the Blackstone Inn for a romantic weekend getaway. The couple had chosen the inn for its seclusion, hoping to escape the bustle of city life. The snow-covered grounds and crackling fireplaces seemed idyllic at first, but from the moment they entered their room, Sarah felt a deep unease. "It's colder in here than the rest of the building," she remarked as she unpacked. Mark dismissed her concern, chalking it up to old heating systems. However, the unease grew stronger that evening. As the couple prepared for bed, Sarah noticed faint scratching sounds coming from the walls. Mark inspected but found no source. They decided to ignore it and settled in for the night. Hours later, Sarah woke to the feeling of someone watching her. Opening her eyes, she saw a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. Thinking it was Mark, she whispered his name, only to realize he was fast asleep beside her. When she looked back, the figure was gone. The next morning, Sarah's nerves were on edge, and she convinced Mark to ask the innkeeper about the building's history. Mrs. Whitaker, the elderly owner, hesitated before recounting a tragic tale. In the late 1800s, the inn had been a boarding house owned by a man named Elias Blackstone. According to legend, Elias was a cruel and paranoid man who accused several boarders of stealing from him. One night, in a fit of rage, he locked 3 boarders in the basement and left them to die. The bodies were discovered months later, and Elias vanished, never to be seen again. Since then, guests had reported strange occurrences: doors slamming on their own, cold spots, and the sensation of being watched. Mrs. Whitaker dismissed these as old ghost stories meant to attract tourists, but Sarah was unconvinced. That evening, the couple decided to investigate the basement. Armed with flashlights, they descended the creaky stairs into the dark, musty room. The air was heavy, and the faint smell of decay lingered. As they explored, Mark noticed scratch marks on the walls, some of which appeared to form words: "Help us," and "He watches." Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and their flashlights flickered. A loud bang echoed from the corner of the basement. Mark shone his light toward the sound, revealing a shadowy figure crouched in the darkness. It moved unnaturally fast toward them, before vanishing into thin air. Panicked, the couple fled to their room. That night, Sarah experienced vivid nightmares of being trapped in the basement, with shadowy hands clawing at her. She awoke screaming, only to find fresh scratches on her arms. Mark, terrified, insisted they leave, but a snowstorm had made the roads impassable. The next day, the couple attempted to document the phenomena using their phone cameras. They captured doors opening and closing on their own, faint whispers, and even a shadow moving across the room. However, each time they tried to call for help, their phones malfunctioned. As night fell, the activity grew more violent. Objects flew across the room, and the walls shook as if something was pounding from the other side. The final straw came when the bathroom mirror shattered, revealing the words, "Get out," scrawled backward in the frost. The storm finally let up the following morning, and Sarah and Mark wasted no time fleeing the inn. They vowed never to return, but shared their footage with paranormal investigators. The videos posted online went viral, drawing attention from both skeptics and believers. Paranormal teams who visited the Blackstone Inn reported similar phenomena: unexplained cold spots, disembodied voices, and apparitions. Some even claimed to see Elias Blackstone himself, a gaunt figure with hollow eyes, wandering the halls. Several teams left abruptly, unable to handle the oppressive atmosphere. Mrs. Whitaker closed the inn indefinitely, unable to keep guests or staff. She admitted to investigators that she'd experienced strange occurrences herself, but had hoped they would stop over time. The building now sits abandoned, its windows boarded up, but locals report seeing lights flicker inside at night and hearing screams carried on the wind. To this day, the curse of Blackstone Inn remains one of the most chilling paranormal cases of 2024. Was it the restless spirits of Elias's victims seeking justice, or was the malevolent presence Elias himself, bound to the place of his crimes? Whatever the truth, the haunting of Blackstone Inn stands as a stark reminder that some histories refuse to be buried.
Thank you for joining us in the shadows tonight, brave souls. If you survive these tales from the dark, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another spine-tingling story. And as always, remember, the darkest corners are just a step away. Until next time, stay cautious, stay curious, and keep your lights on, because you never know what's lurking out there in the dark.